The reflection in the mirror was a stranger, or perhaps the most honest version of myself I had ever seen. The dress was simple, a deep navy blue that clung to my frame not with a practiced ease of confidence, but with the quiet apology of someone unused to taking up space. It was the best thing I owned, and even in it I felt like a fraud. A shadow fell across the doorway, clipping the soft light from the hall. Genevieve, my sister. She leaned against the doorframe, a vision of casual perfection in silk pajamas, a mug of steaming tea, cradled in her perfectly manicured hands. She didn't need to try. Beauty was her native language. I was still struggling with the alphabet. She took a slow sip, her eyes the same color as mine, but somehow brighter, more alive, roaming over my form with an air of clinical assessment. "Where do you think you're going in that?" she asked. The question was light, almost playful, but it carried the familiar, sharp undertone of ridicule. My own voice, when it came, was flat. A defense mechanism. "Out. Out," she repeated, the word tasting like an amusing foreign concept on her tongue. "With who?" I adjusted the sleeve of the dress, the fabric suddenly feeling coarse and cheap under my fingertips. "It's not a date. Oh, honey," she sighed, a theatrical sound of pity that set my teeth on edge. "Of course it's not, but you're trying for it to be one, aren't you?" She pushed off the doorframe and glided into the room. The scent of her expensive perfume, something with notes of jasmine and condescension, filled the small space. She stopped behind me, her reflection appearing next to my own. The contrast was brutal. Where I was angles and shadows, she was curves and light. Her blonde hair fell in effortless waves, framing a face that had launched 1,000 compliments. My own brown hair was pulled back, severe and practical. "You know," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper as she tucked a stray strand of my hair behind my ear. Her touch ice cold. "I'm just trying to help you, save you from embarrassment." She met my eyes in the mirror. "That color does nothing for you. It makes you look sallow, washed out." She paused, letting the words land, and the dress. "It's just so severe. It highlights all the wrong things." I didn't respond. I had learned long ago that silence was my only armor against her. Engaging was a battle I could never win. My mind, however, was cataloging the insults. Not with emotion, not yet, but with the cold precision of an archivist. Each word was a specimen, pinned and labeled. Sallow, washed out, severe, wrong. "Honestly, Kira," she continued, her voice softening with mock sincerity, "you should just cancel. Call him. Tell him you have a headache. It's better than him seeing you and making up an excuse to leave after 10 minutes. She looked at my reflection at the plain, unadorned face staring back. "You're my sister and I love you, but you have to be realistic. You're just not built for this sort of thing." Her eyes flicked down my body and back up, a final dismissive appraisal. "You're just a little bit ugly, in a way. Not horribly so, just plain. And plain doesn't get a second date. Ugly." The word hung in the air between us, a small, perfect grenade of cruelty. It wasn't a shout, was a statement of fact, delivered with the casual authority she applied to everything. I felt a tremor start in my hands, a tiny rebellion. My body was staging against my mind's forced detachment. I clenched them into fists at my sides, the knuckles white. The analytical part of my brain was already breaking it down. The intent to wound. The method, a direct assault on my deepest insecurity. The desired outcome, my retreat, my surrender. For a fleeting second, a flash of raw, hot anger burned through the detachment. I wanted to turn, to scream, to claw that perfect, placid mask from her face. Instead, I just stared at our reflections. The beautiful sister and the plain one. The one who shone and the one who was her shadow. "I have to go," I said, my voice as colorless as my face. "I'll be late." Genevieve shrugged. a delicate, dismissive gesture. "Don't say I didn't warn you." She turned and drifted out of the room, leaving the scent of her perfume and the echo of her words behind. For a full minute, I stood perfectly still. My breath was shallow. The analytical engine in my mind was stuttering, overwhelmed by the data. Ugly, the word wasn't a specimen anymore. It had broken free, was a poison seeping into my bloodstream. I looked at the dress, at my face. She was right. Of course she was right. What was I doing? This was a mistake. A pathetic, hopeful little mistake. My phone buzzed on the dresser. A text message. I picked it up with a hand that was not quite steady. It was from my friend Lena. "You on your way. Just checking in. You're going to kill it." Lena, grounded, practical Lena. She was the only one I'd told about this meeting. I'd framed it as a professional opportunity, a potential freelance gig, which it was, mostly. Her belief in me was a small, warm light in the cold cavern. Genevieve had just carved out of my chest. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I could do it. I could cancel. Have a headache? So sorry. It would be so easy. But Genevieve's voice was in my head, a smug, satisfied whisper. "I told you so, and that was the catalyst." Oh. The anger returned. No longer a flash, but a slow, hardening resolve. It wasn't about proving her wrong. Not entirely. It was about refusing to let her win. Refusing to let her define the boundaries of my life. I took one last look in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes too wide. But beneath the fear, beneath the hurt, something else was looking back. A flicker of defiance. It was enough. I walked out of the room, out of the house, and didn't look back. The air outside was cool, and it felt like a splash of cold water. To the face. I walked toward the bus stop, my steps deliberate. Each footfall on the pavement was a small act of rebellion. The meeting was in a coffee shop downtown, the daily grind. A neutral, unassuming place. The man I was meeting, Julian Croft, was a senior art director at a boutique advertising firm, or so his online profile said. I'd reached out to him for an informational interview, sending him a link to my meager portfolio of graphic design work. He'd agreed, surprisingly quickly. The bus ride was a blur of streetlights and shadows. With every passing block, Genevieve's words faded slightly, replaced by a nervous, thrumming energy. My analytical mind took over again, running through probabilities. Best case scenario, he likes my work, offers me some advice, maybe a freelance project. Worst case, he's a scammer or a creep. Or, perhaps worse, he takes one look at me and his face fills with the same pity Genevieve's had. I clutched. The strap of my portfolio case, the worn leather, a familiar comfort. This was about my work, not my face. To remember that. The daily grind was busy. The air smelled of burnt coffee and steamed milk. It was loud, filled with the chatter of students and the clatter of ceramic on wood. I found a small table in the corner, my back to the wall, a position of observation. A position of defense. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want and set my portfolio on the table. A shield. He was 10 minutes late. With each passing minute, Genevieve's voice grew louder in my head. It's not coming. He saw your profile picture again and changed his mind. My detachment was failing, cracking under the strain. I was seconds away from packing up and leaving, from admitting defeat when a man stopped at my table. "Kira," he asked. He was not what I expected. I had pictured someone older, artsier, maybe a scarf. Julian Croft was tall, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. His hair was dark, cut short and neat. He looked less like an art director and more like a high-powered attorney or a CEO. His eyes, a startlingly clear shade of blue, were sharp and assessing. They didn't just look at you. They seemed to scan you. I stood a little too quickly, Julian. "Yes. Hi, I'm Kira." "A pleasure." He gave a polite, small smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, sat down, placing a sleek leather briefcase. On the floor beside him, he moved with an economy of motion, a quiet confidence that was both intimidating and fascinating. My apologies for the delay. The traffic was worse than anticipated. It's no problem at all, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. An awkward silence stretched between us. He wasn't looking at my portfolio, he was looking at me. His gaze was intense, analytical. It felt different from Genevieve's appraisal. Hers was designed to diminish. His was harder to read. It was like being examined by a scientist. So I began pushing the portfolio forward slightly. Thank you again for agreeing to meet with me. I know you're very busy. As I said in my email, I'm a huge admirer of the work your firm does, and I was hoping. He held up a hand, a gentle but firm gesture that cut me off. Kira, he said, his voice low and even, I need to be forthright with you. I am not an art director. My blood ran cold. Worst case scenario. Scam, creep, my hand instinctively tightened on my purse. My mind raced, calculating escape routes. He seemed to read my panic. Please don't be alarmed. My name is Julian Croft, but my meeting with you was arranged under a slight pretense. I stared at him, my throat suddenly dry. I don't understand. He leaned forward slightly, his blue eyes locking onto mine. I am the head of new talent scouting for a company called Aura Models International. The name meant nothing to me. Sounded generic. My suspicion remained a hard knot in my stomach. I saw the headshot you use on your professional networking profile, he continued, ignoring my bewildered silence. It was taken by your friend, I presume? The lighting is amateur, the focus is soft, and yet I couldn't stop looking at it. He was talking, but the words seemed to be coming from a great distance. My brain was struggling to process the input. Models, this had to be a joke. A cruel, elaborate prank. Had Genevieve set this up? No, even she wasn't that inventive. Sorry, I said, shaking my head. I think you have the wrong person. I'm a graphic designer. I gestured to my portfolio as evidence. I'm not a model. I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. No, he agreed, his expression unchanging. You are not. Not yet. He reached into his suit jacket and pulled out a slim, elegant card case. He slid a single card across the table. It was thick, heavy cardstock, embossed with a simple silver letter, A. Below it, in clean sans serif font, Aura Models International. And below that, his name and title. We are not looking for conventional beauty, Kira, he said, his voice compelling, hypnotic. Conventional beauty is a commodity. It's boring. Sells perfume to the masses. We are looking for structure, for character. His eyes moved from my eyes to my nose, to my jawline. We are looking for a face that can tell a story. Your face has that. You have incredible bone structure. The zygomatic arches, the line of your jaw, the orbital sockets, it's all there. The camera would love you. He was speaking a different language, a language of angles and bones. It was the language of an artist, but the subject was me, my face. The face my sister had called plain ugly dot. The word echoed in my mind, a stark contrast to his clinical, almost reverent description. I felt a strange, dizzying vertigo, completely opposite assessments of my own physical being. One from my sister, designed to tear me down. The other from this stranger, delivered with the weight of professional authority. This is a lot to take in, I murmured, my fingers tracing the raised letter on the card. It felt real. Of course, he said, leaning back. Let me be clear. This isn't an offer of a contract. Not yet. This is an invitation. I want you to come to our studio in the city. We'll do some simple Polaroids, some test shots, no makeup, no styling. It's just you and the camera, to see if what I see in person translates to a photograph. He paused. I am rarely wrong about this. The certainty in his voice was absolute. It was the certainty of a man who held power, who shaped careers, who saw value where others saw nothing. He saw it in me. a tiny, dangerous spark of hope ignited in my chest. It was terrifying. Hope was a vulnerability I couldn't afford. It was there, and it was growing. The image of Genevieve's smug face flashed in my mind. Plain doesn't get a second date. What if this was more than a second date? What if this was second life? I don't know what to say, I stammered. The detached analyst within me, finally, completely offline. All that was left was the raw, thrumming shock. Say you'll think about it, he said, his small smile returning. This time it seemed a little more genuine. He stood up, his tall frame momentarily blocking the light. The number on that card is my direct line. Call me by the end of the week. He gave a short, polite nod. Was a pleasure to finally meet you, Kira. And then he was gone. He moved through the crowded coffee shop and out the door, leaving me alone at the small table with a cold cup of coffee, a portfolio that had never been opened, and a business card that felt like it weighed 100 pounds. It felt like a bomb had gone off in my quiet, orderly life, and I was sitting in the silent, ringing aftermath. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Lena. How'd it go? I stared at the screen, at the blinking cursor. How could I even begin to explain? How could I type out the words? My life might have just changed forever. How could I tell her that the ugliest part of me, according to the person who was supposed to love me most, was the very thing that a complete stranger saw as extraordinary? I didn't reply. I carefully placed the business card in my wallet, a sacred relic. I packed up my useless portfolio, left the coffee on the table, and walked out into the evening air. The city lights seemed brighter, sharper. The world felt different. Or maybe I was the one who was different. The bus ride home was a silent movie. I watched the faces of the people around me, the tired commuters, the laughing students. I saw them all through a new lens. What did Julian Croft see when he looked at them? What hidden structures and untold stories did their faces hold? When I reached my front door, I hesitated. I could hear the television inside. I could hear Genevieve's light musical laugh. For a moment, I considered turning around, walking away, and never coming back. But that would be running. I was tired of running. I opened the door and walked inside. She was sprawled on the couch, flipping through a magazine. She glanced up as I came in, her eyes immediately searching my face for signs of defeat, of humiliation. She was expecting tears. So, she said, a smirk playing on her lips. Did he have an emergency and have to leave early? I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw the perfect hair, the flawless skin, the casual cruelty in her eyes. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel plain. I felt potential. A secret power was humming in my veins. I didn't say a word. I just held her gaze. For a long moment, a small knowing smile touched my own lips. Then I turned and walked up the stairs to my room, leaving her sitting in a silence that was, for once, entirely of my own making. The click of my bedroom door shutting was a sound of finality. It sealed me in with the impossible secret and sealed Genevieve out with her ignorance. For a moment, I just leaned against the wood, the cool flat surface, a grounding presence against my back. The house was quiet downstairs. I imagined her on the couch, the magazine forgotten in her lap, her perfect brow furrowed in confusion. That small, silent victory was a taste of something new, something potent. My movements were slow, deliberate. As I walked to my desk, I pulled the business card from my wallet. Aura Models International. The card felt heavier now, charged with significance. I laid it on the desk under the lamp, the silver A catching the light. It's an artifact from another reality. My laptop hummed to life, the screen casting a blue glow in the dim room. My fingers, still trembling slightly, typed the name into the search bar. Aura Models International. The results flooded the screen. It wasn't a boutique agency. It was the agency. The official website was a masterpiece of minimalist design. Stark, white and black, no clutter, just images. But what images they were! Faces I recognized from billboards, from the glossy pages of the magazines Genevieve. Left scattered around the house. Supermodels, icons, women, who looked less like people and more like art. Their gazes were fierce, ethereal, challenging. They weren't just pretty. They were forces of nature. I clicked through the portfolios, a silent observer in a world I had never imagined I could even touch. Each photograph was a story, a mood, a statement. And this agency, Aura, was the author, my analytical mind. The part of me that processed the world in neat, orderly columns of logic was in overdrive. Fact. The agency is legitimate. Top tier, global. Fact. Julian Croft is their head of new talent. A search for his name brought up articles in fashion journals, interviews where he talked about the architecture of a face. He was a kingmaker. Fact, he sought me out. Not for my work, not for my mind, for my face. For the very thing Genevieve had just branded with the word ugly. The word reappeared in my mind. But this time it felt different. Absurd, like trying to describe the sun as dim. It was a word from a smaller, meaner world, Genevieve's world. The world I was looking at on my screen was bigger. It operated on different principles. Julian hadn't said I was beautiful. It said I had structure. It used words like an architect or a sculptor. He saw raw material. He saw potential. Genevieve saw a plain sister to be kept in her place. Julian Croft saw a blank canvas to be placed in a museum. A bubble of something wild and unfamiliar rose in my chest. It wasn't just hope. It was a hysterical, terrifying joy. A laugh escaped my lips, a short, sharp, incredulous sound. I, Kira, the quiet one, the shadow, the afterthought, a model. The sheer, glorious absurdity of it was intoxicating. The revenge wasn't a plan anymore. It was a path laid out before me on a glowing screen. I wouldn't have to say a word to Genevieve. I would just have to become. My phone buzzed, vibrating against the desk. Lena's name glowed on the screen. How'd it go? This time, I didn't hesitate. I pressed the call button. She picked up on the first ring. Kira. Finally, I was about to send out a search party. Did you get the freelance gig? Was he a creep? Tell me everything. Her voice was a rapid-fire burst of worried energy. Lena, I said, and my own voice sounded strange to me, distant. What is it? What's wrong? Her tone shifted instantly to concern. He wasn't an art director, I said, my eyes still fixed on the face of a Brazilian model on my screen who looked like she could command armies with a glance. What? What do you mean? Who was he? I took a deep breath. His name is Julian Croft. He's the head of scouting for Aura Models International. Silence. For a full 5 seconds, the only sound was the faint static of the connection. I could picture Lena on the other end, her brow furrowed, processing. Then an explosive shriek. What, Kira? Aura? Are you serious? No, you're not serious. Is this a joke? I have his card, I said numbly. I'm on their website right now. It's real, Lena. It's all real. I knew it, she yelled, her voice a mix of shock and vindication. I knew it. I have been telling you for years that you have a model's face, that bone structure, and you never listened. You just let. You know, she didn't have to say Genevieve's name. We both knew who she meant. He wants me to come in for test shots, I said, the words feeling like a recitation from a script I hadn't memorized. Polaroids? No makeup. Oh my God, she breathed. Kira, this is it. This is the before part of the movie. This is the moment everything changes. Her excitement was a physical force, traveling through the phone and pushing back against the cold dread that was beginning to seep into the edges of my shock. But what if it's a mistake? The doubt was a whisper, but it was there. What if I go and they just laugh? What if he was just being polite? What if I'm not enough? What if Genevieve was right all along? Enough. Lena's voice was firm, cutting through my fear. Kira, listen to me. Guys like that, agencies like that, they don't make mistakes. They don't have time to be polite. They are sharks, and they just told you that you look like good hunting. This isn't about being pretty. Genevieve is pretty. This is about being interesting. And you are the most interesting person I know. She paused. What do you have to lose by going? Seriously? Tell me. What is the absolute worst case scenario? I thought about it, my analytical mind latching onto the prompt. Worst case scenario. I go to the studio. They take my picture. They decide I'm not what they're looking for. They say, thank you for your time. I go home. Nothing would have changed. I would be exactly where I am right now, in my room with a secret. Nothing, I said, the realization dawning on me. I have nothing to lose. Exactly, Lena said softly. And what's the best case scenario? Everything. The best case scenario was everything. A new life, a new identity, a way out, a way up. The kind of revenge you don't have to orchestrate. You just have to live. You have to do it, Kira, Lena said, her voice filled with a fierce loyalty that I felt in my bones. You have to call him. You have to go. For you, and maybe just a tiny little bit to imagine the look on your sister's face when she finds out. A genuine smile spread across my face. Just a tiny bit, I agreed. Call him now, she urged. No, wait. Don't call him now. It's late. You'll seem desperate. Call him tomorrow, mid-morning. Be cool. Be professional, okay? I said, breathing out slowly. Okay, mid-morning. So proud of you, she said, and the simple, honest words almost broke me. We hung up a few minutes later. I closed the laptop, plunging the room back into darkness, save for the single beam from my desk lamp illuminating the business card. Lena was right. I had nothing to lose. And Genevieve had given me everything I needed to win. Her cruelty had been a gift. It was the fuel. It was the fire. I slept that night, a deep and dreamless sleep. For the first time in years, I didn't dream of being invisible. The next morning, I woke before my alarm. A strange calmness had settled over me. The decision was made. The path was clear. I showered and dressed in my usual unassuming clothes, jeans, and a gray sweater. I moved quietly through the house. Genevieve was in the kitchen, making a smoothie. She glanced at me over the rim of the blender. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. My quiet confidence yesterday had clearly unsettled her. You're in a weird mood, she stated. It wasn't a question. Am I? I said, pouring myself a glass of water. My voice was even, calm. Don't play dumb, she snapped. What happened last night? Your little date cancel on you? I took a slow sip of water, holding her gaze. I thought about the power of a secret. The immense potential energy stored within it. Something like that, I said, and walked out of the kitchen at precisely 10:30 a.m. I sat on my bed, the business card in my hand, and dialed the number. I expected a receptionist, a series of transfers. He answered on the second ring. Julian Croft. His voice was exactly as I remembered. Crisp, efficient. Mr. Croft, I said, my voice steady, professional. The voice of someone he would want to work with. This is Kira calling. We met yesterday at the Daily Grind. Kira, he said. There was no surprise in his voice. 'Twas as if he had been expecting my call at this exact moment. Glad you called. I've thought about your invitation. I said the words feeling momentous, each one a step onto a new continent. I'd like to accept. I'd like to come in for the test shots. Excellent, he replied. There was a faint sound of typing. We have an opening tomorrow afternoon. 2 p.m. Our studio is at 545 Fifth Avenue, 40th floor. Just give my name at the front desk. It's 2 p.m., I repeated, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was real. It was happening. I'll be there. Very good, he said. Come alone. And Kira, remember what I said? No makeup, no styling. Just you. I'll remember, I said. Thank you. He hung up. I sat in the silence of my room, the phone still pressed to my ear. Tomorrow, in just over 24 hours, I would walk into a room, and my life would either snap back to the way it was, or it would change forever. Downstairs, I could hear the faint sound of Genevieve's television show. She was sitting down there in her world, so sure of its rules, so sure of my place in it. She had no idea the ground was about to shift beneath her feet. The silence that followed the click of the disconnected call was heavier than any sound. It was the silence of a sealed verdict. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the numbers were like coordinates marking a destination in a foreign country I had never intended to visit. A country where my face was the only passport I needed. For the rest of the day, I moved through my own life like a spy. Every familiar action was imbued with a strange new weight. Making a sandwich was a study in the movement of my hands. Reading a book was a chance to observe the way light from the window carved shadows below my cheekbones. I was cataloging myself, was trying desperately to see what he had seen. I stood before my mirror again that evening. It was the same mirror that had reflected Genevieve's casual cruelty back at me. But the reflection was different now, because I was different. My analytical mind was in control. I depersonalized the image. I was no longer looking at me. I was looking at a subject. I traced the line of my jaw with my finger. It was sharp. I'd always thought of it as too harsh, too masculine compared to Genevieve's soft, heart-shaped face. But Julian's word came back to me. Structure. I tilted my head. The angle created a deep shadow under my cheekbone. Zygomatic arch. I saw it. For the first time, I saw it not as a flaw, but as a feature. A line on a blueprint. The door creaked open. Genevieve stood there, arms crossed, her silk robe cinched tightly around her waist. Her expression was a mixture of irritation and raw curiosity. She couldn't stand not knowing. My newfound calm was a puzzle she was determined to solve. "Are you going to stare at yourself all night?" Kay, she asked, her voice sharp. "It's a bit narcissistic even for you." The insult was automatic, a reflex, but it lacked its usual sting. It was a dart hitting a stone wall. I didn't turn from the mirror. I simply met her eyes in the reflection. "I was just thinking," I said, my voice even. "About what?" She pressed. Stepping into the room, "Your mystery man, did he finally text you back to officially reject you?" I let a small, unreadable smile touch my lips. "You're so interested in my life all of a sudden?" I observed coolly. Her face tightened. "Don't be ridiculous. I'm bored." But her eyes betrayed her. She was not bored. She was threatened by the unknown. I had disrupted the ecosystem of our home, the one where she was the sun and I was a nameless orbiting rock. Now, I was a rogue planet and my trajectory was a mystery. "Well," I said, finally turning to face her directly, "I'm sorry to be so boring." I walked past her and sat on my bed, picking up my book. A clear dismissal. She stood there for a moment longer, fuming in the silence. She had no ammunition because she had no information. I had starved her of the oxygen of my insecurity that she was so used to breathing. With a frustrated sigh, she turned and left, pulling the door shut with a little more force than necessary. I didn't read a single word on the page. I just listened to her footsteps retreat down the hall, the sound of my old life walking. Away, the next day passed in a surreal haze. The hours stretched and compressed, time flowing like thick syrup. I woke with a jolt of pure adrenaline, my stomach a knot of tightly coiled snakes. Today I dressed with clinical care. Julian's instructions had been specific. No makeup, no styling, just you. So I put on the simplest things I owned. Black jeans, a plain fitted long-sleeved shirt in a charcoal gray. I pulled my hair back into a simple, severe ponytail. No stray strands, no artifice. I was presenting the raw material, the blueprint. When I looked in the mirror, I was a blank slate. Terrifying, and freeing. I managed to avoid Genevieve. Leaving the house while she was in the shower, I couldn't face another interrogation. I didn't have the energy. Every ounce of my focus was trained on the hours ahead. The bus ride into the city was an exercise in forced detachment. I put on my headphones but played no music. The silence allowed me to observe the world from behind a one-way mirror. I watched the blur of suburbs give way to the dense geometry of the city. I watched the faces of the people getting on and off, the woman with the tired eyes and kind smile, the young man with the sharp suit and anxious energy, the teenage girl with a face full of bright, hopeful makeup. I wondered what Julian would see in them. I wondered what stories their bones told. This new perspective was a strange gift. It was as if I'd been colorblind my whole life and had suddenly been given glasses that allowed me to see a whole new spectrum. The world was made of angles and light now. My phone buzzed. Text from Lena. Thinking of you. You are a secret weapon. Go show them. I held the phone, her words a small warm shield against the fear. I typed back a single word. Trying. Fifth Avenue was another world. Stepping off the bus was like stepping onto a different planet. The scale of it was humbling. Towers of glass and steel clawed at the sky. The sidewalks teemed with a river of humanitarists, shoppers, business people moving with sharp, aggressive purpose. The air vibrated with a unique, expensive energy. I found the address easily. 545 Fifth Avenue. It wasn't just a building. It was a monument. Sheer cliff of dark glass and bronze that seemed to inhale the sunlight without reflecting any of it back. The entrance was a vast revolving glass door that spun with silent, intimidating efficiency. Men in dark suits and women in impossible heels flowed in and out, belonging to this world in a way I couldn't comprehend. I stood across the street for a full 10 minutes. My portfolio case clutched in my hand like a child's security blanket. This was the barrier, the threshold. Inside that building, on the 40th floor, a version of my future was waiting. And the only thing stopping me from meeting it was me. Every insecurity I had ever had rose up, a chorus of screaming doubts. You don't belong here. You're a fraud. They will take one look at you and laugh. Genevieve was right. Turn around. Go home. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. My palms were slick with sweat. It would be so easy to just turn, to get back on the bus, to retreat to the safety of my quiet, invisible life. So easy, I closed my eyes. I pictured Genevieve's face, that look of smug certainty she wore when she called me ugly. I pictured the quiet pride in Lena's voice. And I pictured Julian Croft's eyes, not cruel, not pitying, but assessing. Seeing something no one else had, seeing potential. My breath hitched. My analytical mind made one final calculation. The variable of the unknown was terrifying. But the certainty of returning to the life I had, that was worse. Fear was a data point, could be observed and then ignored. I opened my eyes. The building no longer looked like a monument. It was just a place, an address, a destination. Taking a steadying breath, I crossed the street, the walk signal, a silent command. I did not hesitate. I walked toward the revolving door, a single anonymous figure merging with the flow of the city. I pushed against the heavy glass, and the sounds of the street fell away, replaced by the hushed, air-conditioned whisper of the lobby. I was inside. The lobby was a cavern of polished marble and silence. The air was cool and still, smelling faintly of clean stone and money. My footsteps, quiet as they were, seemed to echo in the vast space. It was designed to make you feel small. It was working. A man in a sharp, dark uniform stood behind a monolithic granite desk. He watched me approach with an expression of professional neutrality. His gaze flickered down to my simple clothes and the worn portfolio case. And for a microsecond, I saw a flicker of dismissal. It was a look I knew well. I had been on the receiving end of it my entire life. But today, it didn't make me shrink. It was just data. I'm here to see Julian Croft, I said, my voice betraying none of the tremor I felt in my hands. Have a 2 o'clock appointment. My name is Kira. He tapped a few keys on a screen I couldn't see. Yes, he said, his tone unchanging. 40th floor. The elevator bank is to your left. He gestured with a pen, a crisp, final movement. I was authenticated. I was permitted. The elevator was a small, mirror-lined box. As the doors whispered shut, sealing me inside, I was confronted with a dozen reflections of myself. A dozen pale, serious girls in gray shirts, all of them looking terrified. The elevator began its ascent, silently, impossibly fast. There was no sensation of movement, only the glowing numbers above the door changing rapidly. 15, 22, 34. With each floor, the pressure in my ears increased. I felt like I was leaving the world behind, rising to a place where the air was thinner, the rules different. I thought of Genevieve, probably watching some talk show, completely oblivious. The secret I held felt like a tangible thing, a heavy stone in my pocket. And I was carrying it up to the 40th floor to see what it was worth. The doors opened not into a hallway, but directly into another world. The reception area for Aura. Models International, it was blindingly white. The floor was polished white concrete, the walls were white, and the ceiling was a constellation of recessed lights. There was no art, no clutter. Just a long, low-slung black leather couch and a single black desk that looked like it had been carved from a block of obsidian. Behind the desk sat a young woman with impossibly black hair cut into a severe geometric bob. She was talking quietly. Into a headset, her voice a low murmur. She didn't look up. The only color in the entire space came from a massive, wall-sized screen that was playing a silent, slow-motion video of a model walking through a desert. Her red dress, a slash of crimson against the sand. The silence here was different from the lobbies. It was an active, curated silence. A silence that judged. I took a hesitant step forward, and the woman at the desk finally looked up. Her eyes were as dark and polished as her desk. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice cool and detached. "I'm Kira," I said, my own voice sounding thin. "I have a 2 o'clock with Julian Croft." She nodded once, a barely perceptible motion. "He'll be right with you." She looked back down at her computer, and I was dismissed. I stood awkwardly in the middle of the vast white space, not wanting to presume to sit on the couch. I felt like a smudge of gray paint on a pristine white canvas. Every second stretched into an eternity. This was the real test, I thought, to see if you could stand the waiting, to see if you could bear the weight of the silence. Then a door I hadn't even noticed opened, and Julian Croft stepped out. "Kira," he said, and his calm, professional voice cut through the tension. "You're punctual. I appreciate that." He was dressed as impeccably as before in a dark suit without a tie. He moved toward me, and the space seemed to arrange itself. Around him, "Thank you for seeing me," I said, the formal words feeling clumsy. "Of course," he said, giving me a quick, assessing glance. He seemed to approve of my severe, unadorned appearance. "Follow me." He led me through the door he'd come from, down a short white corridor. At the end was a heavy soundproof door. He pushed it open, and my breath caught in my throat. The studio was a cavernous white void, a massive infinity wall, swept from the floor up to the ceiling in a seamless curve, creating the illusion that the room had no corners, no end. High above, a complex grid of lights and rigging was suspended in the darkness. The air smelled of dust and electricity. In the center of this immense emptiness stood a camera on a tripod. It looked like a black, multi-limbed insect, its single glass eye aimed directly at the center of the void. Next to it, a man with a shaved head and a focused, intense expression was adjusting a dial. He didn't look at us. "Kira, this is Stefan," Julian said. He'll be taking the shots today. Stefan grunted in acknowledgement, his eyes still on his equipment. All right, Julian said, his voice all business. We're just going to take some simple Polaroids. I want you to walk to the center of the curve. There's a small piece of tape on the floor. I saw it. It's a tiny black X in the sea of white. It looked miles away. I walked toward it, my boots making no sound on the specialized floor. The silence was absolute now. When I reached the X, I turned and faced them. The lights were hot. I felt utterly, completely exposed, a specimen under a microscope. Good, Julian said from the darkness behind the camera. Now, just stand. There, relax your hands at your sides. Look directly into the lens. I tried to relax, but my body felt stiff, alien. A collection of awkward angles. I looked into the unblinking eye of the camera. It saw everything. Click. The sound of the shutter was brutally loud in the silence. It was the sound of being captured. Okay, Julian's voice said. Kay, turn your head to the left. Slowly, I turned my head. My mind was a blank slate. I wasn't thinking. I was just executing commands. Click. To the right, // click. Double quotes profile. Chin up slightly. / click. It went on like this for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 5 minutes. My body was an object they were documenting from every possible angle. Full length, shoulders up, face only. Each click of the shutter was a judgment. I felt nothing. The analyst in my brain had taken over completely, creating a protective wall of detachment between me and the experience. Then Julian's voice changed. It was softer, more thoughtful. Kira, he said. I could feel his eyes on me from the darkness. I want you to forget about us. Forget the camera. He paused. I want you to think of a time someone told you that you couldn't do something. A time someone underestimated you. Genevieve's face appeared in my mind's eye, her voice dripping with pity. You're just a little bit ugly, in a way. Now Julian's voice continued, a low, compelling murmur. I want you to think of a secret you have, a secret that gives you power over them. It's a business card, the website, the phone call, this room, this very moment. The secret wasn't just a secret anymore. It was a reality, a weapon I hadn't even begun to wield. Slow, cold smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated triumph. It was the smile of knowing you've already won a war no one else knew you were fighting. My chin lifted instinctively. My eyes, looking into that lens, were no longer vacant. They were alive. They were dangerous. Click, click, click. The shutter was faster now, more frantic. Stefan was muttering something in a language I didn't understand. Julian was silent for a long moment. Then his voice came out of the darkness, quiet and final. Okay, we have it. Just like that. It was over. Spell was broken. Stefan, the photographer, was already detaching the camera from the tripod. His work done, Julian stepped back into the light. His face was completely unreadable. There was no praise, no disappointment, nothing. Thank you, Kira, he said, his tone back to its usual professional calm. That's everything we need for today. The whiplash was staggering, felt dizzy. So, what happens now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. We'll review the shots, he said, already walking toward the door. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch. The 4 vaguest, most non-committal words in the English language. He led me back through the white corridor, past the silent receptionist, to the elevator doors. It had been less than 15 minutes. He pressed the button for me. Thank you for coming in, he said. It was a formal, polite dismissal. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside, turning to face him. I searched his face for any sign, any clue. There was nothing. Goodbye, Kira, he said, and the doors whispered shut, leaving me alone with my dozen reflections once more. They looked just as stunned as I felt. The descent was a silent, dizzying fall back to earth. Did I succeed? Did I fail? Was that smile what he wanted, or was it too much? I had no idea. I had no data. Was completely, terrifyingly in the dark. The doors opened to the lobby. The noise of the city filtered in from the street. It all seemed loud and chaotic now. I walked through the revolving doors and out onto the sidewalk back into my old life. But everything was different. The trial was over. And now all I could do was wait for the verdict. Stepping out onto Fifth Avenue was like surfacing from a deep dive. The world rushed back in a sensory assault. The roar of traffic, the cacophony of a dozen conversations, the smell of exhaust and roasted nuts from a street cart. It was all too loud, too bright, too real, after the sterile, controlled vacuum of the 40th floor. I felt dizzy, disoriented, like a time traveler blinking in the light of an unfamiliar century. I clutched my portfolio case, the useless prop, and it felt like the only piece of my old life I had left. The bus ride home was a silent film playing outside the window. But the real movie was inside my head. It was a looped recording of the last 15 minutes. Julian's voice, "Relax your hands." The brutal, percussive sound of the shutter. Click. The heat of the lights on my skin, my own reflection in the camera's lens. A distorted, wide-eyed stranger. My mind, my analytical, orderly mind, was desperately trying to process the data. But there was none. An unreadable expression is not a data point. "Will be in touch" is not a result. It's a void, an absence of information. And my mind, which, abhor as a vacuum, kept replaying the scene over and over, searching for a clue, a sign, a dropped inflection that I might have missed. Was my smile a mistake? The question pounded in my head. In that moment, fueled by the memory of Genevieve's cruelty, it had felt like power, like truth. But in this world of cool detachment and curated perfection, was raw emotion a flaw? Did it read as authentic confidence or as unrefined arrogance? I had no way of knowing. I was an amateur who had just played a game without knowing the rules. And now I was left to wonder if I had won or lost. As soon as I turned onto my quiet suburban street, I pulled out my phone and called Lena. I needed an external processor, an interpreter. "I'm out," I said the moment she answered. "And are you a supermodel yet? Are they flying you to Paris tomorrow? Don't leave me hanging, Kira." I relayed the events in a flat monotone, like a field agent delivering a report. The white room, the silent photographer, the sequence of commands, Julian's unreadable face. The final dismissive, "Will be in touch." When I finished, Lena was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said, her own voice thoughtful. "Okay, so they gave you nothing." "Nothing," I confirmed, my heart sinking. Hearing it said aloud made it feel more real. "Kira, you idiot," she said, but her voice was warm. How it works. They're not going to gush and tell you you're the most beautiful creature they've ever seen. This is a business. They have all the power, and they know it. They want to see if you'll sweat. They want to see if you're professional and unreadable. Face is a good sign. It means you're still in the running. Or it means they'd already decided no and were just being polite. I countered. The voice of my doubt a perfect echo of Genevieve's imagined sneer. "No," Lena insisted, her certainty a lifeline. "A man like that, an agency like that, they don't have time for politeness. If it was a no, you would have known. It would have been a firm, cold, 'Thank you for your time. This isn't the right fit.' End of story. 'We'll be in touch' means let's talk about it, and then we'll be in touch. You're on the table. Kira, you're officially on the table." Her logic was a soothing balm on my frayed nerves. It made sense. It was a plausible interpretation of the data. I held on to it. I had to. The next 24 hours were the longest of my life. Time became thick, syrupy, a slow torture. Every minute that passed felt like a small no. Every hour, a definitive never. My phone was a bomb that I couldn't stop looking at. Every phantom vibration in my pocket sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through my system. I checked my email every 10 minutes. Spam, a sale at a bookstore. Nothing. Genevieve watched me like a hawk. My nervous energy was a beacon to her. She could smell my anxiety, and it delighted her. She mistook it for the fallout of failure. "You've been quiet since your big trip to the city," she commented that evening as I listlessly pushed food around my plate at the dinner table. "I guess it didn't go so well, huh?" Her tone was light but laced with a triumphant "I told you so." I looked up at her perfect, beautiful, smug face. I thought about my secret smile in the studio. I summoned a shadow of it now. "It was an interesting experience," I said calmly. "Interesting," she scoffed. "Oh, that's what people say when it was awful. It's okay, Kira. Not everyone is meant for the spotlight. Some of us," she gestured vaguely to herself, "are just born for it. And some of us are born to be, you know? Behind the scenes, ugly, plain." The words were arrows, but for the first time, they didn't seem to pierce my skin. They felt like they were coming from a great distance, from someone shouting from a shore I had already left. The next day was worse. Hope began to curdle into dread. Lena's logic started to fray. What if they had 100 girls like me on the table? What if my file had already been pushed to the bottom of the pile? By 3 p.m., a full 25 hours after Julian had said he'd be in touch, I gave up. It was over. It had been a fluke. A weird, brief, exhilarating detour that was now leading me right back to where I started. The disappointment was a cold, heavy weight in my chest. Genevieve was right. She was always right. I was a fool to think I could be anything else. I was in my room, about to close my laptop on my fruitless job search for graphic design positions. About to officially surrender when my phone rang. An unknown number. New York area code ... My heart stopped. Literally. It ceased to beat for one terrifying second. Then it kicked back into gear, a frantic hammering rhythm against my ribs. I stared at the screen, my hand frozen, trembling. This was it. The verdict ... With a deep breath, I answered, my voice is surprisingly steady. "Hello. May I speak with Kira, please?" It was a woman's voice. Cool, crisp, and utterly professional. It was the voice of the receptionist with the geometric hair. "This is she," I said, my throat tight. "This is Eleanor Vance calling from Aura International," she said. Her tone was so flat it could have been a recording. "Mr. Croft has asked me to call you. He and the partners have reviewed your test shots." She paused. And in that 1-second gap, my entire future hung suspended in the air. I saw two paths diverge in front of me, one leading back to this room, to this life forever. The other leading somewhere else, somewhere unknown. "He would like to schedule a follow-up meeting with you," she continued, with no change in inflection. "The purpose of the meeting will be to discuss the terms of a potential development contract." The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds, terms, potential contract. My brain slowly began to assemble them into a coherent thought. They weren't just in touch. They wanted another meeting. They wanted to discuss a contract. "Are you still there?" Ms. Vance asked, her voice cutting through my shock. "Yes," I breathed. "Yes, I'm here. We have an opening tomorrow at 11 a.m. Does that work for you?" Tomorrow, again, this new life moved at the speed of light. "Yes," I said, my voice gaining strength. 11 a.m. works perfectly. "Very good. We'll see you then." And she hung up. I lowered the phone from my ear. I stood up from my desk. The room was silent. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 2 minutes ago, but nothing was the same at all. A contract. They wanted to sign me. A laugh bubbled up from my chest. It wasn't the hysterical, incredulous laugh from before. This was something else. It was a low, deep, shuddering laugh of pure, unadulterated victory. The cold weight of disappointment in my chest had vanished, replaced by a feeling so fierce and bright it was almost painful. Genevieve was wrong. The thought was a thunderclap. It wasn't a hope. It wasn't a wish. It was a fact. A proven, undeniable, glorious fact. Genevieve was wrong, and I was just getting started. For a long, silent moment, I stood in the sunbeam, letting the reality of the words wash over me. A potential development contract. It wasn't just a key to a new door. It was the deed to a new world. The raw, triumphant laugh subsided, replaced by a cold, sharp, and utterly thrilling clarity. The game had changed. I wasn't waiting for an invitation anymore. I had been summoned to the negotiating table. My first call was to Lena. I didn't even say hello. The second she answered, I said the words aloud, needing to hear them in my own voice to confirm they were real. They want to discuss a contract. Resulting shriek was so loud I had to pull the phone away from my ear. It was a sound of pure, unrestrained, vicarious victory. Yes, Kira, I told you. I told you. When? What did they say? Are you a millionaire yet? Tomorrow, I said, a smile finally breaking across my face. 11A.M. I relayed the brief, sterile conversation with Eleanor Vance. Lena's excitement was a whirlwind. But then, just as she had before, she snapped into focus. Her practical, grounded nature took over. "Kay, listen to me," she said, her voice suddenly serious. "This is amazing. It's everything. But this is where you have to be smart. They are going to put a piece of paper in front of you that is designed to benefit them as much as possible. You cannot just sign it because you're grateful." "I know," I said, already pacing my room, my mind kicking into a familiar analytical gear. "No, I'm serious," she insisted. "This is business. You need to read every single word. Ask questions. Ask stupid questions. What's their commission? Is it different for editorial versus commercial work? What about expenses? Who pays for flights? For your portfolio? What does exclusivity mean, exactly? Can you do a local catalog shoot? Or do they own your face for everything? You have to. Think like a shark, Kira, because they are." Her words weren't meant to scare me. They were meant to arm me. "Okay," I said, grabbing a notebook and a pen. "A shark. Got it." That evening, I didn't sleep. I researched. I fell into a rabbit hole of fashion law blogs, model forums, and articles dissecting industry standard contracts. I learned the language, commission, term, territory, buyouts, vouchers. Each new term I understood was a piece of armor. I wasn't going into that meeting tomorrow as a grateful, wide-eyed girl from the suburbs. I was going in as a businesswoman. My face was the product, yes, but my mind was going to be my agent. The next morning, the ritual was the same, but the feeling was entirely different. I dressed in the same simple, dark clothes, but as I looked at my reflection, I wasn't a blank slate anymore. I was a person on the verge of a transaction. I was here to claim what was mine. Genevieve was in the kitchen, leaning against the counter, scrolling through her phone. She looked up as I filled a water bottle, her eyes narrowed with the same suspicion as the day before. "Off to the big city." "Again?" she asked, her voice thick with sarcasm. "Don't tell me they actually wanted to see you a second time." I paused, screwing the cap onto my bottle. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her beauty, which had once seemed so radiant and powerful, now looked mundane, limited. It was the beauty of a prom queen, not the structure of a work of art. Her world was so small, her weapons so dull. "Something like that," I said. My voice was calm, but there was a new edge to it. A hint of the cold, clear power that was humming in my veins. I started to walk out. "Don't bother coming home crying to me when they finally..." Tell you what I've been telling you your whole life, she called after me. I stopped at the doorway but didn't turn around. I wouldn't dream of it, I said, without a trace of malice. It was a simple statement of fact. And then I left, leaving her in a silence that I knew must feel, to her, like the sound of the world tilting off its axis. The journey was different this time. The city didn't seem intimidating, seemed like a promise. The Aura building didn't feel like a monument. It felt like my new office. When I gave my name to the security guard, he nodded with a flicker of recognition. I belonged here now. Upstairs, on the 40th floor, the silence felt less judgmental and more respectful. Eleanor Vance looked up from her desk and gave me a small, professional smile. "Good morning, Kira. They're ready for you." She led me not to the studio, but to a corner conference room. 3 of the walls were floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a breathtaking panoramic view of the city below. A long, dark wood table dominated the room, surrounded by sleek leather chairs. It was a room where fortunes were made and destinies were decided. Julian Croft stood to greet me, but he was not alone. Sitting at the table was an older woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a severe gray suit. "Kira, good to see you again," Julian said, his smile genuine this time. "This is Maria Thompson, our head of legal affairs." Maria. Thompson nodded curtly, her eyes appraising me with a lawyer's precision. I nodded back, meeting her gaze without flinching. "Please, have a seat," Julian said, gesturing to the chair opposite them. In front of the chair was a bottle of water and a folder. A thick folder. The contract. "Kira," Julian began, leaning forward. "Your test shots were exceptional. More than we had hoped for. You have a very rare quality. A combination of strength and vulnerability that is extraordinarily compelling on camera." He paused. "We believe you have the potential to have a very significant career. And we want to be the ones to build it with you." My heart swelled at the praise, but I kept my expression neutral. Maria Thompson slid the folder across the table. "This is our standard development contract," she said, her voice crisp and direct. "It's a 3-year exclusive agreement. We will invest in your development, which includes poise and runway coaching, building your book with top photographers, and securing placements for you at castings. In return, the agency takes a 20% commission on all domestic earnings and 30% on international bookings. All travel and accommodation for jobs outside the city will be covered. Specifics on buyout clauses for campaigns are detailed on page 14. She spoke clearly, professionally. I listened, my mind cross-referencing her words with the hours of research I had done. Lena's voice was in my head. "Think like a shark." When she finished, they both looked at me, expecting silence, or perhaps a timid "okay." Instead, I opened the folder. I looked at Maria. "The 30% international commission," I began, my voice steady. "Does that include an additional deduction for the mother agency in the foreign territory? Or is Aura absorbing that fee, Maria?" Thompson's eyebrows shot up a fraction of an inch. Julian's lips twitched in a suppressed smile. "Aura absorbs the mother agency fee," she said, a new note of respect in her voice. I nodded, scanning the page. "And the expenses for building the initial portfolio, the test shoots, are those considered an advance that is later recouped from my earnings, or is that part of the agency's initial investment?" "That is our investment," Julian answered directly. "We don't get paid until you do." I continued for 10 more minutes, asking calm, pointed questions about territory, image rights, and contract termination clauses. With each question I asked, I could feel the dynamic in the room shifting. I was not a child being handed a toy. I was a partner entering into a negotiation. I was showing them they had found not just a face, but a mind to go with it. Finally, I closed the folder. "Thank you," I said. "You've been very clear, of course," Maria said, relaxing slightly in her chair. "Take it with you. Have a lawyer review it. We'll need your decision by the end of the week." I looked from her to Julian. I looked at the contract sitting on the table. I thought of the life it represented. A life of travel, of art, of work. A life a million miles away from Genevieve's petty cruelties and the suffocating silence of my bedroom. The risks were huge, but the risk of staying where I was so much bigger. "That won't be necessary," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I don't need a lawyer." Both of them stared at me. "I understand the terms," I continued, "and I accept them." I pulled the folder towards me, opened it to the last page, and picked up the heavy, expensive pen they had left on the table. My hand did not shake as I signed my name Kira on the signature line. The stroke of the pen was a firm, dark line, separating my past from my future. I pushed the signed contract back across the table. Julian Croft looked down at my signature, then back up at me. And for the first time, he let a full, unguarded smile show. It transformed his face. "Welcome to Aura, Kira," he said.